Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear. If a soldier could only have one folder, it would probably be the Recon 1 in Tanto. So don't get excited. This is not my knife. My Recon 1 is coming in the mail. Actually, by the time this video is posted, I'm sure I've got it. I'm getting pretty much the rest of, at least most of my nicer knives shipped over to me. On the base, just because I'm still going to be doing videos here for a while. I don't know why I didn't get them all sent over or brought over with me in the first place. Just didn't know how much I can get away with, having a big old case of knives with me, showing up in the military looking like a total nut job. But turns out I'm not the only knife guy on the base, and I've got a couple of my buddies here who've hooked me up with their knives to show off for some videos. And this Recon 1 Tanto, of course, happened to make it on my desk. This was one of those things that kind of got me excited to get my Recon 1 back, so I did make the call to get those other knives shipped. So I'll be excited to have my old Recon 1 here for examples and knife comparisons and all that stuff again. I'll probably carry it a little bit on the off side because if you remember, I am stuck with only the right-hand clip on mine. I did carry it for a long time in the off side or in my left-hand pocket, but kind of reverse like this. And with most knives, as I've mentioned before, a couple of my finger scars here are due to carrying things like the 940-2 as backup knives, but in my offhand pocket, being lazy and not changing the pocket clip and then going to reach in my pocket and skewering myself on the tip. The detent wasn't strong enough, or it just got positioned in a way that the point got stuck out like that, and it just becomes a little hazardous. Now, the Recon 1, I had carried it like that for years. Never had any issues with it because the detent is so bloody strong on this. But it is a hazard and just something to look out for. A cold steel triad lock knife like this is probably just about as close to a fixed blade feel as you're going to get for a folding knife. Maybe the 8015, one of the only exceptions. I don't see how the locking system could become disengaged once your hand's wrapped around that. So with very few exceptions, the triad lock is about one of the safest knives and knife locks that you can get, and the cold steel marketing does a fine job of letting you know that, of course. But the big downside to this is it's a little bit long, a little bit bulky, and a little bit tactical if maybe you're looking to look a little bit more normal. I carried one of these for 8 years, a little bit more than 8 years, as pretty much the only knife that I used, and I'm telling you, you get some funny stares all over the place. People do not like big, black, tactical, aggressive knives like this. And even at work, working in the forestry world or wildfires and stuff, you'd expect people to be a little more open to stuff like this, but man, you will get razzed for taking something like this out around most people. But even in the military, this is a little bit aggressive, and there's some guys who are going to be like, oh, you don't need something like that. Something like another military friend of mine happened to lend me this 940 here. The 940 is a great little knife, super lightweight. It punches way above its weight class as far as what it can do as a knife. Like a 4-inch blade, a little bit like maybe under 3 ounces or around 3 ounces. And doesn't feel like as small or light of a knife as it is at all. So do you need a huge 9-inch, 6 ounce, I think 6.5 ounce, something like that knife? No, you don't. But you can get away with doing a lot of stuff, the smaller knives that you can do with this, but there are some tasks that you're going to want something a little bit more aggressive. And not that you should, and not that I'm recommending it, or not that Cold Steel would recommend it, but if you had to baton through a piece of wood or firewood or do some crazy bushcraft stuff, or worst case, throw this thing. I don't know why you would ever have to do that, but if you had to, this thing would probably hold up better than most knives. After a few years, I got a little bit of blade wobble in mine from a lot of, just doing things I shouldn't have been doing with it, and then taking it apart, reassembling it, and maybe just not doing as good of a job, making sure it was super clean on the way in. I don't know if the washers look super great on mine anymore, but yeah, maybe I'll take that apart sometime and give you the full show. Be able to see what the triad lock looks like from the inside as I take it apart and clean it out if you've never seen that before. But this really is probably one of the better choices if you couldn't carry a fixed blade on you and you had to carry some kind of folding knife, but you're in a situation like, say, army stuff or wildfire, sure, but if you were apocalypse knife, that's always kind of a fun, ridiculous topic. Did a whole video on that, talking about what my one knife would be. Feel free to check that one out. That's probably one of my favorite video topics. Kind of transfers over to if you were, like, say, running out of your house, maybe not in North America these days, but there's all kind of crazy emergencies going on all kinds of places in the world right now. And maybe some people in Eastern Europe know what I'm talking about, where maybe you want to make sure that if you're out and about just on a grocery run, you should be prepared with certain tools just in case you get stuck out there for a while. So something like a Recon 1 doubles up as a pry bar, maybe a step. Don't use your knives as steps for climbing trees and stuff. Just saying, not a good idea. But if you had to, this is something that should hold up. I wouldn't necessarily trust something like a Spyderco Pacific Salt 2 or Endura or something similar to that. The plastic feel of the knife, not a good, no, and the blade wobble, not a good sign. Probably not something you'd want to try that with. Again, don't try it with any folding knives. But point being, this is going to get you through almost anything you're going to need. And in the military, I know even in a little bit of training that I've been exposed to in my short time in, you get doing things with your knives that you should not be doing with them. Whether it's just like prying, twisting metal parts, or fixing things around a camp, or just some of the odd stuff you end up doing. Wire. Some of the things I've seen done with knives around barbed wire would make any knife guy cringe. The amount of abuse something like this can take versus the amount something like a Spyderco or some of the smaller, even a thicker Benchmade, something heftier like the Super Freak has its limits. The M4 steel has its limits. And if you ding up this M4 steel doing something stupid, you are going to need some professional tools or all the patience and all the time in the world to get that blade reprofiled. The S35VN on this thing is still going to be a bit of a pain, but S30 and S35VN were made for folding knives, and they are easy enough to sharpen that you don't have to pull your hair out doing it. The versions from, I think, 2015 to 2018 of most Recon ones and most cold steel knives around the $100, $200 range, those are all crewwear, weren't they? Yeah, they were all crewwear for about 3 years. So you may have a crewwear, a CPM crewwear version, if you bought your Recon ones around that time. Before that, they were Osate, which is what mine is in. That's a much cheaper steel and a much easier to sharpen steel, also much easier to dull. But just something to pay attention to when you're buying your knives. If you are planning to beat the crap out of them and you buy a super expensive, like something 3V or 204P or some kind of a crazy edge retention, probably also crazy hard to sharpen knife, you're going to have a hell of a time getting an edge back on it. And if you're in the field doing some kind of a field task or field X or bushcraft, that's going to be a problem. So steel type, something to think about. You don't always need the biggest, fanciest steel, just the one that's more appropriate for the job. That's why I really enjoy 1095. Only big downside is that it's not corrosive resistant at all. So if you get any kind of water on there and don't clean it off and oil it, you will get some rust and eventually some permanent staining and patining and all that. So downsides to all your knife steels. But for the most part, S35VN is one of the most balanced you're going to get. So probably a decent choice. And you see a lot of actually bushcraft companies like Essie, White River, and there's a lot of like White River and Bark River. True, I'm blanking on a lot of these fixed blade companies people suggest to me over the years, and I don't really dive too much out of the realm of K-Bar SE tops and this stuff now, because I do plan on picking up a lot of their products, trying them out. But there's a lot of S35VN fixed blades out there nowadays for bushcraft knives, and it's there's ways to heat treat it now that people didn't have figured out when this was first invented, where it's not as brittle and it will actually handle some beating and some batoning and abuse and stuff. So S35VN, pretty well rounded all over the place if you're going to end up using this for prying metal and stuff like that. Not a great idea, but it's probably going to hold up and you're not going to worry about snapping the tip off this mean old Tanto. So other situations you could get into, I'm not going to talk about too much because I'm really not qualified in my experience to talk about, but Tanto is very good at penetrating dense plated and Kevlar surfaces if you needed to do such a thing. Going to have a hard time getting through anything like that. It's going to require a lot of force and probably a reverse grip, which is one of the only reasons reverse grip is ever really a good idea unless you're some super crazy ninja Doug Marcaida knife fighter. I don't know how good he'd be against a super crazy aggressive like Tim Kennedy though, but you get the idea. Knife fighting and all that stuff, not my forte and not most people's forte, but if you ever had to get through something, this really thick, decently thick blade stock anyways, Tanto grind is probably going to be your best bet of punching through stuff. And generally speaking, for stabbing and getting decent penetrating and withdrawal and all that stuff, Tanto is one of your better bets. And you can see it's a pretty high flat grind here. I haven't mentioned that before, did I? The old Recon ones were a hollow grind, like mine is a hollow grind. This is a full flat grind, a little bit of a high transition here, which gives you a nice thin edge, which let me just show you how bloody sharp I could get this thing. It was relatively dull when I got it, like not super dull, but Recon 1, whatever they do with this blade profile, when I got mine out of the box years ago, I just remember being absolutely terrified to cut myself when I was testing it on my arm. But this thing here and the Tanto edge, let's just show you. Oh yeah. Yeah, she's ready to go. Recon 1, for whatever reason, takes a hell of an edge, and this thing is just singing right now. There's a bunch of details and stuff I haven't talked about in the different variants of the Recon 1 and different similar cold steel models, but I do have a fairly well-received Recon 1 review over on the side panel. That's probably popping up. I'm sure I'll stick it up at the end of this video at some point when I do my post work. But the Hard On Gear channel button down below will get you to the channel, and just Google Recon 1 or search my top videos. I think it's like probably in top 5 or something like that. So check that out if you want some more details on the Recon 1 if you're thinking about picking it up. And let me just do a few size comparisons here to close it out. Let me see the paramilitary 2 and the... There we go. Pacific Salt 2, a little bit larger of a spider code and match up to the Recon 1, but still not quite. And a couple of Benchmades. Since I've got that 940 here, let's look at the 940 and put the code 4 next to it, which the code 4 makes such a... Let's see that 940 for a minute. That code 4 is such a nice comparison because, as I said before, when I picked up the code 4, it's kind of like a baby Recon 1. If this was a Spear Point Recon 1, you'd see very well that they're almost an identical knife, just a little big and small version. So not quite Rat Model 1, Rat Model 2 small and large in comparison, but yeah, 9-inch overall versus 8-inch overall, and a much thinner handle scale, much thinner carry in the pocket for the Code 4. Recon 1 still disappears pretty well once you get used to it, but there's no doubt if you're not used to handling it, it's a hell of a knife. And once I went to carrying a few smaller things, even something like the Manix 2 from Spyderco, which, where the hell did I just put that? Yeah, the Manix 2 was a downgrade in size, but it's still very comfortable in the hand. And when I got used to handling the Recon 1 again, I started to understand what people always talked about, which was, why the hell do you need such a massive knife? You don't need it, but boy, when you get used to it, you can make full use of it. But yeah, so Spyderco, great. Benchmade, great. I've been carrying a lot of those companies for a lot, like the last couple years. Like my Recon 1 and a lot of my other cold steels now have been floating in the background while I try some of the other brands that I've been neglecting throughout the years. But cold steel will always have a special place in my heart, and the Recon 1 will basically always be the knife that started me on my crazy knife nerd journey, because I, bought terrible things like Bear Grylls collaboration knives with Gerber before that. Made a bunch of other terrible knife decisions that everyone can relate to if you've gone through the knife rabbit hole. But thanks to you-know-who for lending me this Recon 1, as well as the fellow who lent me the 940-2 and this super sweet sock P knife from Benchmade, which I just sharpened up with my little work sharp field sharpener. So I'll be doing a video on that. That'll be coming out sometime in the week before or after this Recon 1 video. But yeah, thanks fellas for letting me test these things out, and for all the guys letting me handle their knives. Kind of a nice perk of being in the military, getting to handle a bunch of knives that I don't have to spend my money on. So you'll be seeing a lot more guest appearances from knives that are not my own on this table in the coming years. So yeah, cheers on this one. Thanks again for tuning in. Hit the like button if you want to see more cold steel stuff. I'm sure you do. I do plan on picking up more cold steel in my future. And yeah, feel free to check out my review and the other stuff I've got from cold steel and the other knives over on the Hard On Gear channel. See you on the next one. This is the Hard On Gear channel signing off.